Sifo and Duduzile were a married couple in the village of Soweto in Africa. Their marriage story was very interesting. One evening, Sifo fell in love with Duduzile when he saw her among the women who came to fetch water at the fountain. Duduzile also liked him. They had to overcome many obstacles to get married, but now all of that was in the past. They didn't have many possessions in their home. They had a modest home with 2 beds and a few chairs. They were poor but happy. Sifo earned money by herding cattle in the village, but this money was not enough to support the household. Duduzile also tried to support the household by selling the fabric embroideries she made at home. Duduzile's father was very upset about the situation. He couldn't bear to see his daughter in this condition. He had never wanted this marriage from the beginning. He had never intended to give his daughter to that poor boy, but he had reluctantly given in to Duduzile's insistence. The rains had greatly decreased in the village, and a period of drought had set in. The crops had not yielded as expected. People were beginning to experience financial difficulties. Families with money had long since left and abandoned the place. Duduzile and Sifo were condemned to stay here. One night, as they thought about their dire situation, Sifo said he would go to neighboring villages to find work. They would have to be separated for a while. Duduzile didn't want this, but there was nothing she could do. The next day, Duduzile bid farewell to Sifo with a small bag of provisions. They bid each other goodbye with tears in their eyes. Days passed. Duduzile cleaned houses in the village for money. Sifo helped people with cattle in neighboring villages. Every month, Sifo sent Duduzile a small amount of money through the postal boys. Her father saw how his daughter was getting more and more worn out. One night, unable to bear it any longer, he came to Duduzile's small house. Duduzile felt ashamed when she saw her father at the door. She didn't want to show her father her poor home. Reluctantly, she let him in. Her father, without prolonging the matter, told Duduzile that she was getting more worn out every day, that Sifo would not return, and that she was waiting in vain. Duduzile was very angry, but she waited for her father to finish speaking. Her father told Duduzile to divorce Sifo. These words deeply touched Duduzile. She wanted to kick her father out of the house, but she didn't have the strength to get up. She could only cry. Her father gave her 10 days to think about it and left the house. Sifo was unaware of what was happening. He just wanted to work and earn money. But things weren't going well for him either. The drought had also affected the surrounding villages. They had sold their cattle, and Sifo was again left without a job. He had to go to the city and ask strangers for work. He couldn't send money to Duduzile this month. The remaining money only fed himself. A few days later, Sifo, unaware of what had happened, set out for the city under the scorching sun. Duduzile was exhausted. Grief had made her sick. There was very little food left in her house. She knew her father would come soon. She didn't want him to see her like this, but she had no choice. So the days passed, and one morning, as the sun was rising, her father arrived. He was knocking on the door, but Duduzile wouldn't open it. Eventually, he pushed the door open himself. He found his daughter lying half-conscious on the floor. He immediately picked her up and took her to his own house. He gave her herbal remedies, fed her, and asked her to rest. Duduzile began to slowly regain consciousness after 2 days. She could now stand up. When her father saw that she was ready to talk, he sat her down and told her that Sifo would not come back, and she shouldn't wait for him anymore. Duduzile was powerless. She hadn't heard from Sifo for a long time anyway. During this time, she tried to help her father by cleaning his house and doing household chores, since her mother had died years ago, leaving no one to do the chores. Months passed. Sifo found a job in the city. He was carrying the luggage of the wealthy at a very low price. This heavy work had taken a toll on Sifo's back. Since living in the city was expensive, the money he earned was barely enough for himself. He missed his wife very much, but there was nothing he could do. He had heard that things were not going well in the village. He had also heard that Duduzile was staying at her father's house from a few people. He wasn't very upset because he knew that staying at her father's house was safer for Duduzile. He just dreamed of the day they would reunite. All he wanted was to improve his financial situation, take his wife from her father's house, and live happily ever after. During those days, a distant friend of Duduzile's father came to the Soweto village. Everyone in the village knew this man. His name was Bongani. He used to live in this village and then became rich in the city. He would visit the village once a year to see the people. The villagers didn't like this man very much. They thought he was very arrogant, but they didn't say anything because he had money. He had come this year as well, and he chose Duduzile's father's house to stay. Duduzile's father had agreed to host his old friend Bongani for a small fee. In the mornings, Duduzile prepared breakfast, and after they ate together, Bongani went to visit the locals in the village. Duduzile's father accompanied him. Duduzile cleaned the house in her free time. For the past few days, something had caught Duduzile's attention. Her father and Bongani started spending every hour of the day together, and they were having heated whispers. It seemed like they were afraid of Duduzile overhearing these whispers. Duduzile had always been uncomfortable with this man's gaze. From the beginning, his meaningless smile, when he looked at her, irritated her. She was also secretly angry at her father for hosting this man. One day, as Duduzile was cleaning the house, her father suddenly arrived. He wanted to talk to Duduzile about something private. They sat together in a quiet corner. Duduzile's father seemed troubled. He seemed unable to articulate what he wanted to say. Duduzile was afraid. Finally, her father, struggling, told her that he wanted to marry her to Bongani, and that Bongani really liked her. Bongani had offered a considerable amount of money for this. Due to the drought, her father had been forced to accept this offer. Duduzile didn't want to marry this man, who was much older than her. Her father told Duduzile that she had to get married. Duduzile couldn't get Sifo out of her mind. She told her father that she would wait for Sifo. Her father told her that Sifo would not return, and perhaps he was already dead. Duduzile cried non-stop until evening. She wanted to escape from home, but her father's eyes were on her. In the evening, Bongani also came to the house. He had brought a valuable necklace with him. Duduzile's father made Duduzile sit next to Bongani, while he himself sat in a corner. No one cared about Duduzile's tears. Her father was only thinking about the amount of money he had received. Bongani tried to put the necklace he had bought on Duduzile's neck. Although Duduzile tried to leave the room, she remained motionless after her father forced her to sit down. Despite her reluctance, Duduzile's husband was now Bongani. Bongani decided to build a big house in the village and live there with Duduzile. Their house was really huge. Duduzile no longer cleaned the house. Instead, there were servants to clean it. Duduzile was no longer hungry or sick. She didn't go to clean people's houses for money anymore, but she wasn't happy either. Her mind was still on her first husband. She wondered what she would do if he ever returned. She cried secretly from Bongani. Bongani tried to talk to Duduzile, but she only gave short answers and remained silent. She was angrier with her father. She would never forgive him for selling her for money. Sifo, on the other hand, was unaware of these new developments. There was only one change in his life. He had found a new job with a higher salary. He no longer carried luggage. He was repairing city roads for money. He was now able to save money in his new job, and he was happy because he would send this money to Duduzile. He had arranged with a postal boy to send the extra money he had this month to Duduzile. He had last seen his wife months ago. He missed her so much that Duduzile often appeared in Sifo's dreams. In his dreams, he often saw Duduzile crying. Sometimes he woke up at night and thought about his wife. He prayed to God to see his wife as soon as possible. One day, while repairing the city roads, he saw a poster. A foreign group of people had launched a campaign to help the villagers affected by the drought. Soweto village was among the villages to be helped. When Sifo saw this poster, he was very excited and took action. He would apply to help and guide the foreign people. This was the only opportunity he had to see his wife after months. He didn't want to miss this opportunity. He took leave from work and visited the hotel where the foreign people were staying. Through an interpreter, he explained his situation. The president of the foreign group said they would gladly include him in the group. He was overjoyed he would finally see his wife. 3 days later, they set off to help the Soweto village. As he entered the village, he couldn't help but feel how much he had missed it. His heart was racing. There were only moments, even seconds left, until he could tightly embrace his wife. The aid team's cars came to a stop in the middle of the village. Sifo quickly jumped out of the car and began to run towards Duduzele's father's house. The aid team couldn't understand his urgency. Arriving at the front of the house, Sifo began knocking on the door, but no one answered. Determined, he decided to go to his own house and search for Duduzile there. After a long run, he found himself in front of his own house. Shouting for Duduzile, he received no response. He pushed the door open and entered, but the house was empty. The excitement he had felt upon entering the village had now turned to fear. His hands and legs were trembling as he began to run again. When he reached the village center, an elderly local stopped him. The elderly local looked at Sifo with pity in his eyes. He seated him on a chair, intending to explain what had happened. But first, he needed to calm Sifo down. Sifo couldn't stay still. He only asked where Duduzile was. The elderly man sadly explained that Duduzile had been forcefully married to one of the wealthy men of the village. He told Sifo that Duduzile's father had sold her off against her will. Sifo was beside himself. He couldn't control himself. He had fainted upon hearing what had happened. The locals and the aid team gathered around Sifo, trying to revive him by holding a concoction of herbal extracts under his nose. After an hour of effort, Sifo finally opened his eyes. Sifo quickly regained his composure. He asked about Duduzile's whereabouts. The old man pointed to the new house built by Bongani. Without hesitation, Sifo decided to go there. With each step, he felt heavier. Finally, he arrived at Bongani's house. The servants asked him what he wanted, but Sifo said nothing and opened the door himself. In the living room, he locked eyes with Duduzile. Duduzile jumped in astonishment and began to scream. After months, she was seeing Sifo again. Sifo could only cry silently. Duduzile began to cry too. The servants couldn't understand what was happening. Finally, Sifo turned around and left the house. Seeing Duduzile married to someone else had devastated him. Sifo immediately left the village, never to be seen again.